Thank you, John Siegenthaler. Well, now, to lead for the negative, Mr. Robert Krulwich. Robert.
Good. First of all, pardon my lateness. That was the 3:30 shuttle arriving at 7 o'clock, and a traffic accident on whatever that street is along the river. But more cars at 6:20 than I've ever seen going in what I thought was like, nowhere. The other aisle was never, it's not my subject. So, can we believe what journalists report as the news? The reason I have these cards is because I was in the plane so long, I wrote everything down. My answer is no. You cannot believe what journalists report as the news. You cannot. I do not mean by this that when you open up a magazine or open up a newspaper or when you turn on a radio and you flip on the television set, that whatever those people on all those things, in all those places say is hopelessly tainted by the corporate mission that they have to entertain or hype or turn something modestly disagreeable into something explosive, or that they are obsessed by impossible deadlines, which means that they can't really talk to everybody or actually get the spelling of your name correctly. It just couldn't be done under the time available, or that they're given to ritualized forms of writing and speech so that whatever they look at comes through this soundbite sort of screen, so that everybody on television says, well, Washington today, the North Carolina, that sound. Like, did someone tell everybody on television that they should all sound, everybody go up and down with that sound? Somehow, though, they all do talk that way, or many of them. Is it because do I think that all reporters are too lazy or too sloppy or too prejudiced or too racist or too sexist or too something, that they are always wrong about everything? I would not make that argument. What I would say, and what I would argue, is that you cannot believe what reporters report as the news in this fashion. When reporters tell you that something has happened, even though, as John says, they are trained, even though, as John says, they mean well, even though, as John says, they have done it all their lives and hope to God that they didn't do it in vain, I argue that you cannot believe their stories or hold their storytelling to a standard of truth that's too different from the stories you hear in your normal life from other storytellers that you encounter, your friends, your lovers, your acquaintances, your parents, your teachers. After all, they also tell you every day, hey, you got to check out what happened. I mean, you won't believe what happened, a friend might tell you. Reporters in boxes, radio boxes, television boxes, and newspapers also tell you what happened. But you learn as you grow up that certainly that field of acquaintances and family and friends, do you believe everything your mom and dad tell you? When you're 3, you do. But when you grow older, you learn a thing or two. You know better. I am saying that as a class, reporters, most of the time, are only a teeny bit, or if I want to be generous, I'll give them a squidge more reliable than the storytellers and the stories you hear from everybody else in the rest of your life. And as you grow up, you will learn to evaluate, and you should by now be learning, to evaluate their stories the same way you evaluate the stories of other people who tell you things in your life. And just as you don't mind if your friends and your lovers and your parents don't quite reach to the highest standards of truth-telling, if you have a dad who exaggerates all the time, or if you have a mother who's given to constant understatement, you forgive them and you make a little accounting. Well, that's dad. He never, ever tells it like it is. Or that's mom. She never gives it any emotion. But if you just... So you add and you subtract to both of them. It's the same, I would argue, with journalism. You learn as you watch enough television or listen to enough radio or read enough papers or magazines, you learn a little tolerance, and you learn to relax your standards of truth-telling for, I argue, a very good reason. You're 15 years old, you're a woman, you're in the back of a car. There is a 16-year-old with his hand on your chest. That 16-year-old leans over and whispers the words, I love you, in your ear. Now, even at age 15, if you would think That statement, I love you, is to be taken as an even-handed expression of an emotional truth, you would be in, I argue, some trouble. Because he's just trying to get from here to there, arguably. But, if you say to that 16-year-old, did you just say, I love you? What did you mean by I love you? Did you mean I like you very, very much, or did you mean I love you? And why did you say I love you? Did you say, when you use, have you ever used that expression? You would frighten the boy so much. Yes, you are asking for a high standard of truth-telling from the 16-year-old, but at risk here, I would argue, is if you frighten him enough, you'll never hear the phrase again. Well, from him it might not matter, but I argue that what you do in life is you are here to have conversations with as many people and as many inputs and outputs as you possibly can, however imperfect. Because one day, maybe not with his hand on your chest, but one day, maybe with his hands firmly at his sides, some guy will say to you, I love you, and at that point, that will be the 3 most important words you ever hear in your life. But if you keep giving people the eagle eye, anytime that 3-word expression gets used, you may not have the conversation ever. This wouldn't be a good idea. Therefore, as an adult, you learn, I would argue, that all conversations and all storytelling comes to you in a context. And after you go, look, the 16-year-old may actually believe at the moment that he's saying, I love you, at that moment that he really does. But even then, you learn to be wary, you learn to evaluate, and you learn when the situation is interesting to let it go on. You want to keep conversations going, whether it's with the guy, or whether it's between you and Mike Barnacle in the paper, or you and Jimmy Breslin in New York, or you and Jerry Springer on the Tube. They may not be telling you the whole truth, but somehow, in watching Jerry Springer and the guys screaming and carrying themselves on and off, sometimes you learn a thing or two, and I ask you, would you not want to know it? I remember the first time I had this experience. I grew up in the 1960s, so it's earlier time we were a little bit more innocent. But I remember I was watching television, and I saw someone tell me something that I later learned, and I was startled to discover was a lie. It concerned a product called Brill Cream. At the time, my mother had cut my hair in such a way that the hair was like a butch cut, so it all stood up absolutely straight. The Beatles had arrived, and it was now very preferable if you could get your hair to lie down, and if possible, like lie down and be long. My hair was very short and stood up straight the whole time, but I saw this ad where this guy, who had very unruly hair, buys this product called Brill Cream, and he puts a dab, it was a small dot of the cream, on his head, and then he combed it once, the hair fell just relaxed, and then a lot of women came by and ran their hands through his hair, and the line was, Brill Cream, a little dab will do you. Brill Cream, you look so debonair. Brill Cream, a little dab will do you. They love to put their fingers in your hair or something like that. So I went out and I got some Brill Cream. And I put a dab, which smelled, oddly enough, awful. But that wasn't in the ad, but it was because it didn't have smell-o-vision. But it smelled bad. And it also, nothing happened. And my hair, the hair on which the dab was placed, glistened and stood just as straight as ever. So I went from a dab to sort of a glob, and then from a glob to a sort of fairly squeezed. And my head was very, very smelly and very, very upright, and nothing happened. And I remember thinking, the guy lied. You know, I saw in the ad that the hair fell over, so I thought I had seen something true. I knew I wasn't completely an idiot. I knew it was an advertisement, but I'd seen it go over, and mine was still standing straight. Now, did I never watch another ad again? I like those lizards from the Budweiser commercials. I didn't. I just, from then on, always subtracted some credibility, but I kept watching from the ads. Should we believe in journalists? No. I don't think we should trust them. I don't think, however, that we should edit journalists to one standard of truth. I rather think that you should edit us. I'll show you how.